Hi guys, it's Nicole. Welcome back to another video. This is actually the first video I'm filming in 2023, so happy new year. It's a little late. We are halfway through, or almost halfway through January currently, but today I wanted to sit down and chat with you about the 23 books that I'm really hoping to get to sometime this year. I have divided it up into categories. So the first category is new releases I want to try and get to. And then the other category is like sequels I really want to get to. And then I also just have books that like I wish I'd read by now, like books I should have read a long time ago. The first book on my 2023 TBR is The Adventures of Amina Al-Safrafi, I believe you pronounce it. I'm guessing you pronounce it. But this book is a anticipated release for me because I have read from this author before. This is Shannon, is her name Shannon? S.A. Chakraborty's new book. I don't know if her first name's Shannon. I have a feeling it is, but I could be wrong. So we'll just go by what author name she uses. I loved her City of Brass trilogy, or the David Bart trilogy is what it's actually called. City of Brass is the first book. Yeah, I loved it so much, and this is her first series after finishing that series, which I'm excited for. All I know about this book is that we follow a pirate lady who is older, I believe, and she's actually about to go into retirement, retire from her pirate sea adventuring life. However, then she gets the quest to go, I believe, save someone who's been kidnapped, and she decides to do it because there's a huge sum of money involved that would be her reward. So she thinks this could be one last fun hurrah as a pirate and with her crew. I believe she's also a mother as well, and I've really enjoyed in fantasy in recent years reading main characters who are mothers and who are older women. The next book on this list is The Foxglove King, which is written by the same author who wrote For the Wolf. For the Wolf was one of my favorite reads the year I read it. This book is the first book in a new fantasy romance series, and we follow a main character who has magic related to death magic, like necromancy of a sort. She was also raised in a cult, and at 13 years old did escape the cult and has been on the run ever since for the last 10 years or so. And I believe she ends up getting caught not by cult members, she gets caught by the king and is taken in by the king, and then is sort of forced to work with the king to serve his purposes in order to keep on going. A lot of interesting elements that I love: cult, death magic, kings and court politics. Like that's like a basic in almost every fantasy book, but I always love it. I have high expectations considering how much I loved For the Wolf. Yeah, I'm high. No, I'm not. I'm hyped, not high. The next book I am really excited to read this year is Finlay Donovan Jumps the Gun. This is the third and final book in the Finlay Donovan trilogy, which is a trilogy where we follow a mother who's just become a single mother. She's just currently like going through a divorce with her husband. She has 2 young kids. She is an author who is struggling to financially support her family. She accidentally kind of gets hired as a hitwoman and follows through with that, and this book, or at least the first 2 books, has just been a series of accidents. It's a very like chaotic, quirky time. I really enjoyed the first 2 books, and I'm going to read this third and final book as soon as it comes out at the end of January. It's probably going to be like one of the first books on this list that gets read, to be honest. I'm very excited for it. The 4th book I'm really hoping to get to this year is also another sequel that doesn't actually come out until quite later on in the year, so I won't be getting to it quite so soon, but that is Never a Hero. This is the sequel to Only a Monster. I read Only a Monster in a 24-hour readathon that I did back in September last year, and I loved it. It is a YA fantasy that follows our main protagonist who finds out that her family has this secret that they're actually a family of time travelers, and the way time travel magic works in this world is you have to steal others' like life force of a sort like their time in order to gain time and then use their time to travel throughout time. She is at first disgusted. That's why this book is called Only a Monster. Like, they're considered monsters because of the way the time travel magic work, but she is forced to use that magic as she goes on the run because enemies of her family essentially are after her and the other time travelers. I thought it was brilliant, and I'm really excited to see what the sequel has in store for us. Next up, I have a YA fantasy book that I just think sounds amazing, and that is Bonesmith. This is a book that again seems to have like necromancy in it, and I love anything to do with death magic or necromancy. This book has been pitched as Gideon the Ninth meets the Game of Thrones White Walkers. Like, I want to know what that means. Like, what? I'm intrigued. We have our main character who is a ghost fighter, and she is also disgraced. So she is on a quest to redeem herself. So she teams up with someone who is her enemy, and they are trying to go and rescue a prince who has been kidnapped. But things are more than what they seem, I believe. I also love the concept of two people who are forced to work together and they don't get along in the beginning and then they kind of do by the end, which is what I suspect is going to happen in this scenario. So very excited to see it happen. Next up on this list, I have Dark Water Daughter by H.M. Long. Now, this book I only put on here because it's about like pirates, or not necessarily pirates, but I believe there's pirates in the story. I think we follow a pirate hunter, and we also follow a character who is what they call a storm singer, who has some sort of magic, I think connected to weather. It mentioned something in the synopsis about her being able to control tornadoes. I think it was tornadoes. So I'm assuming her magic has to do with the weather. And there's also a disgraced naval officer that plays a part. The synopsis just said a whole lot of nothing to me, to be honest, but there was something in that nothing. There was a lot of buzzwords, and just the setting here just has me most intrigued, and that's why this book has made this list. The last of the 2023 new releases I want to get to this year is Blood Over Bright Haven. This author wrote The Sword of Kaigen, which came out in 2020, and oh my god, that was one of my favorite books of the year, and I haven't read anything else by this author. She does have other books. She was a self-published author for quite a while, but I've been very hesitant to read what else she has out there because a lot of her other books, the self-published ones that she started series for, she's actually discontinued writing those series, or I think it might just be one series, it might not be two. I think I'm exaggerating there. I just haven't been able to bring myself to read it. I don't want to get attached and then not have a conclusion, you know? But anyway, very excited about this one. Do not know much, just that it's dark academia and it's a standalone fantasy. It also said it's supposed to be quite tragic, and like The Sword of Kaigen made me sob, so I expect that from this as well. I'm excited and a little scared. So the second category of books on this TBR are sequels. These are sequels that are already out that if I could do my 2022 reading over, I wish I read. The first of which I think I'm probably gonna try and read this month, and that is Jade Legacy by Fonda Lee. So Jade Legacy is the third and final book in the Greenbone saga. I adored Jade City and Jade Wall. I read them, I think, both back in 2020, and then I just never got to this book in 2021 when it came out, and I was meant to read it last year, and that obviously didn't happen. So I do plan to go back and reread the first two books and then come to this, but this has to happen this year. Like, this shouldn't have happened in 2022. I really thought I was going to make it and read it in the last month, but it didn't end up happening. December did not go my way, so we're gonna make it happen soon. Next up, I have City of Blades by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is a sequel to City of Stairs. The book one, from what I can remember, is set in this world where there was this city that was ruled and controlled by gods, and all those gods have been destroyed or vanished. But I loved book one, so I really do want to read this, and I would also really like to read the third and final book. City of Miracles and get this trilogy knocked out this year. The next book I'm planning to read is the sequel to The Children of Time, which is called The Children of Ruin. This is a science fiction series by Adrian Tchaikovsky. I adored book one. We follow our humans who are up in space trying to find a new planet to live on, and they come across this planet full of alien spiders. We also have a few POVs of the alien spiders, which I loved. They were my favorite chapters to read in that book. I believe this sequel is more of the same, but we have octopuses this time instead of spiders. Another sequel I'm planning to get to is the last book in a trilogy, and that is The God of Lost Words. I'm just cross-checking that's what it's called with my notes down here, and that's what it's called. This is the third and final book in the Hell's Library trilogy. The first book is The Library of the Unwritten, which I read last year, and I also read book 2 last year, and I've really enjoyed this series so far. We follow a cast of characters who live and work in the Hell's Library, which is this library where all these unwritten books, these books that are uncompleted, have resided, and I thought it was just such a fun and unique concept, and I loved the characters. Like, the friendships between the characters is really what makes the story for me. Next up, I really want to read this final book in a series, which is called Wrath by John Gwynne. This is the 4th book in the Faithful and the Fallen trilogy. This is a series that's very inspired by like Vikings. Apart from that, I feel like it's very typical medieval fantasy. It is shameful I haven't read this. I'm ashamed of myself. Like, why haven't I read this yet? The last book on this TBR is The Inadequate Heir by Danielle Jensen. This is the 3rd book in the Bridge Kingdom series, which is a series I read for book 1 of, didn't really like, but then went back and reread, and I just had a lot of fun with my reread, and I really enjoyed the sequel. That it's kind of become a comfort series for me. I did at some point in 2022 try to pick up the audiobook for The Inadequate Heir, but then when I started the audiobook I realized that we don't follow the same main characters, so I didn't really continue after I think listening to a bit of the first chapter. So I do want to go back and continue it because I have really liked what the other books have had to offer in the series, but I was just like apprehensive and stopped because I was really hoping when I picked up this book at that time to continue the story with the characters, the main characters I knew and loved. So a little bit like that kind of hesitation, but I also do really want to continue. The first romance in book 1 and book 2 followed a couple who was like enemies to lovers. In here I believe it's also enemies to lovers, but with different main characters, and I really liked how Danielle Jensen wrote her enemies to lovers, so I hope for good things, basically. The last category is books that I just wish I'd read by now. Like, these books are books that I've been interested in for quite a while. First of which is Little Thieves. We follow our main character Vanja, who has led a pretty harsh life. She is a servant to a princess, and then one day she figures out how to swap places with the princess. So I believe she uses like a magical necklace or something, and she steals the princess's life and they swap places. And so now she finds herself in the court living as this princess, where she's sort of thieving for things as well. She's stealing jewels, and then she gets caught up by a god and is cursed. It just sounds fun. Like, I love the concept. I know my friend Katie adored this when she read it, and I think I will too. The next book on this list is The 100,000 Kingdoms by N.K. Jemisin, which is book 1 in the Inheritance trilogy, and as you can see I do own the bind up of the entire trilogy. I am hoping that I can read all 3 books in 2023, but we shall see. I don't know much. I believe we follow like gods, meddling gods, which I love. Yeah, so according to Goodreads, we follow a young woman who does become entangled in a realm of god and mortal. So we follow our main character at the beginning. Her mother's died due to mysterious circumstances, and then she's summoned to the majestic city of Sky. and there she's named the heiress to the king. Next up on this list I have Son of the Storm. This is a first book in a new series, I believe, and we follow a young boy who is a scholar, and he is very good at being a scholar, but he's not much interested in his work. He's more interested in what's happening outside the city he lives in. But what's outside is very mysterious, is very much kept secret, and he ends up discovering some secrets that he wasn't supposed to know, and I believe he gets entangled with that. I love stories where characters have been kept in a very isolating setting and then the goddess discover the outside world. Next on this list is Nettle and Bone by K. Kingfisher, which I haven't read anything by this author, but they keep popping up. They pop up everywhere and everyone seems to love their books, so I had to put one of their books on this list. And this one, I believe, is their latest release, and it's the one that intrigued me the most. We follow our main character Mara, who is the youngest of 3 sisters, and her 2 older sisters are being abused by a prince. And Mara decides she's had enough and that she's done waiting for someone to come save them, and she's going to take it into her own hands to save all 3 of them. And I believe she teams up with a grave witch, who is like a fairy godmother of sorts, but like kind of sounds like an evil fairy godmother. I love the sort of dark fairy tale-esque vibes that I think this book has. Like, that's kind of the impression I've gotten from reading the synopsis. Next, I have a book that's been on my shelves for so long, and that is Promise of Blood. All I know about this book is that it's a military warfare fantasy. I honestly do not want to know much, I just want to read this. Then I have The Unspoken Name, which is a book, again, why haven't I read this? It has so many buzzwords of mine. We follow a girl who has been raised in a cult her entire life, and she's raised knowing that she's going to be a sacrifice to the gods, and she ends up running away and not being sacrificed. And then when she has to find herself sort of surviving outside this cult environment, she becomes a thief and an assassin. It sounds cool, like so many buzzwords there. Then I have Kingdom of Souls, but we follow a main character who struggles with magic, who doesn't have magic. Our main character, in order to get magic, ends up trading, I think, years of her life. Is that what it was? Yeah, years of her life in order to get magic, and then she ends up being caught between gods and monsters, her ancestors and her future. Her only hope is to sacrifice more and more of the years to save her family and her kingdom. Next on this list I have a reread, and that is Timekeepers by Tara Sem. In one of my unhauls I ended up keeping this book. I was going to unhaul it. I came very close to doing so. I think of this book even more highly compared to when I first read it. This is a book set in an alternate London, where in this London all these different areas are sectioned off. In each of these areas is a clock tower, and that clock tower basically controls the time in that area. So if that clock tower starts to malfunction, time will slow down and be impacted, and if the clock tower dies, then time will entirely stop. We follow a character who is a mechanic who works on the clock towers. So yeah, I want to give this book another go. I think when I read it I gave it like 3 stars, but like now I'm like, it feels like a 4-star read, even though it's been like years. So I want to reread it, give it another shot. I think I just had very high expectations going in, and maybe I was disappointed. But I also want to continue. I want to see what else this world has to offer. I have another book here that I came close to popping in my unhaul pile, but I want to give it a go. And that is The Keeper's Daughter by Gil Arbuthnot. I have owned this book, I think, since I was like 12 years old. It is one of the oldest books on my TBR. This book follows an orphan who has no idea where she came from, what her parents did, who her parents were, but she has this tattoo on her body, this mark, and it turns out that mark on her body has a secret. But she also has a twin, so her twin has the other half of the secret, and together the tattoos make a message. So then she's on a quest to go find her twin, I believe. Okay, we are down to the final book on my 2023 TBR, and that is The Unbroken by C.L. Clarke. I actually did start reading this. I got 75 pages into this book. I read that back in December of 2021, and a huge reason why I think I stopped reading this was I just burned myself out that month. This is another like military warfare fantasy. We follow our main character, Touraine. She is a soldier. She was conscripted as a child and raised in the army, and she's now returned to where she was born, sort of her home country, but she was taken and forced to be in the military. She doesn't really remember that, and then there is a romance with her and someone else, some sort of noblewoman, I think it was. I know this book has a lot to do about like colonization. Terrain's homeland, her country, that's been colonized by the people that she's now working for. So I think it's going to be a very interesting look at her character and sort of the conflicting emotions of being raised by her enemies but not understanding that those are her enemies, because she doesn't really remember her home and her family and the life that was stolen from her. So I think it's going to be heartbreaking but also going to make for a very fascinating read, and I can't wait to get to this. Book 2 I think is coming out this year. And that is the end of my 2023 TBR. If you've made it this far, please leave me this emoji in the comments. Thank you for watching. I hope that the start of the year is going really well for you. I've had a little bit of a hard time recently. I don't know when I'll talk about it. Not this video, maybe another video. That's why I've kind of been a bit MIA, but I'm trying to come back to it. I'm trying to make the most of this year because I feel like 2022 was not a good year for me. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you're well, that you're enjoying whatever you're currently reading. Let me know what your reading plans are for 2023. Let me know what books are on your 2023 TBR. And do I have anything else to add? I don't think so. Just thank you, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.